Before I start my video, I just wanted to warn everybody that I'm going to be talking about mental illness, the stigma, and I'm going to be touching on certain things like eating disorders, which is and anxiety disorders. So if this is triggering to you, please skip this video. Okay. Hi, I'm Marilyn Maya, and today I'm very excited to bring you a sort of recommendations video of my Kim and I's, Kim from Middle of the Book March and I teamed up, and we're doing Mental Health May to bring awareness to this about the stigma of mental illness in this country and all over the world. So, well, that's a big goal for us, but I think it's so important. Now, I've suffered from anxiety disorder for over 65 years, most of my life. So you can say I wrote the book on it. I actually wrote a book about my experiences with agoraphobia and other anxiety disorders. I wrote a memoir. But you know, in the 50s and 60s, when I was suffering from panic disorder, anxiety disorder, no one really knew what it meant. And the people that did know what it mean were not accessible to me at that time. I was brought up, as I said before, born to a mentally ill mother who had manic depressive and was in and out of hospitals. And I just read somewhere that children of people with manic depression are often have anxiety disorders, which was true in my case. And I had to find out myself how to find the tools to be able to live a so-called normal life. It wasn't easy. I just want to say that. And I suffered a lot since I was a child. I had trauma. I was scared of everything. I was scared of doctors, dentists, the dark, climbing up jungle gyms, everything, climbing up steps, everything would bring on symptoms of panic. So as I got into my 20s and realized that I suffered from an anxiety disorder, there still wasn't tools for me to cure that. I was married at a very young age and I got pregnant. And I like to say in my book that I read Childbirth Without Fear, which was the book by Dick Reed, I think his name was, and Grantley Dick Reed. So I said in my book that I fearfully read Childbirth Without Fear. But there wasn't many tools that I had. No one I can speak to. I tried to hide it. And the stigma around anxiety disorders in particular is that it's not really a mental illness, or that was at least, even still, but that was the thoughts back then. So, you know, now that I have a chance to talk about it, I'm very happy to do so and to work with Kim to stop the stigma. Today I'm wearing my shirt from United Self-Help, which is an organization in Hawaii that is consumer run. I didn't know what the name what consumer meant, but we're consumers of mental health when we are going to doctors or getting medication or just, you know, we need to be informed. So this organization, I took some classes and I became not licensed, but I became a peer mentor. So it says, and I'm going to turn around, it's people helping people help themselves. And like I said, it's a group run by people who suffer from mental illness or who are healed in a sense, or who are healing from mental illness. So I wanted to wear my shirt. So let me just talk a little bit about anxiety disorders. And I wrote some things down before I talk about the books. So the DSM, what is the DSM? The DSM is sort of the Bible of mental illness that psychiatrists and all mental health providers look at when they're going to diagnose a person. So it's a reference book. And so anxiety disorders are, I said before, it was an umbrella of mental disorders. They call it a cluster, characterized by significant and uncontrollable feelings of anxiety and fear. So I'm not going to go into all of them, but ones that I was diagnosed with is generalized anxiety disorder. Basically, you're in a state of anxiety all the time to a greater or lesser extent. And people have specific phobias, which, you can sort of like, I'm afraid of blood. When I see blood, I get a panic attack. And, even though I haven't had a panic attack in years, my last panic attack happened because I had dental surgery and there was a lot of blood involved, and I had a terrible panic attack because of that. So you can say that was sort of a phobia that I have about blood, seeing blood. I also suffer from agoraphobia, which I still am working toward right now, where I used to be afraid to go out of the house because of the next one, which is panic attacks. Now, a panic attack is a very, very hard thing. You're just going about your daily life, and all of a sudden you have this horrible feeling that you're going to die at that moment, or you feel that you're not living in the real world, like a feeling of unreality, dizziness, can't breathe. And in my case, I would run outside because I didn't know what to do. And a lot of people that were around me would call the emergency. And I went to emergency rooms since I was like 13. So that was a terrible experience, because once you got there, the doctors would say, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not having a heart attack. There's nothing wrong with you, and there was nothing they can do for you. At that time, there were no medicines that could really help you. So, stop being a baby, or grow up, or some horrible things that people would tell you, and then you would have this stigma. You would be known as that crazy person who just ran out in the street. So then you became afraid to go out, and you would stay home because you didn't want to have that happen again. And there were years where I was afraid to leave my house. So that's agoraphobia, literally fear of the marketplace. Then there's social anxiety disorder, which I didn't suffer from that much, but I have people in my family who have that, where social situations make them uncomfortable and may cause other symptoms of panic or other symptoms. There's also under the umbrella, I won't talk about separation anxiety. Obsessive compulsive disorder used to be under that umbrella of the anxiety disorders, but now it's separate from anxiety. It has its own designation, and they found out we know OCD it's a brain disorder where people have to do the same things over and over. I knew a person who had to look under their car to make sure that no one was under the car, that they were going to, when they started the car, that they were going, they were afraid that there was a child, a dog, or something under the car. So they were really afraid. They were compelled to look under that car, or to wash their hands, until their hands were all red and raw. So OCD is a very hard disorder to cure, as they all are. There's no cure, but there are tools that we can get. I'm going to talk about the stigma, but I'm also going to talk about eating disorders, because that's why I wanted to make especially the trigger warning, because eating disorders, or the one that I suffered for, which is just now recognized by the DSM, which is binge eating disorder, BED. And I suffered from that most of my life. I didn't know what it was. And it has nothing to do with weight or being overweight. It has to do with the compulsion to eat large amounts of food and not being able to stop in a short period of time. So now, there used to be hypochondria. That's taken out of the DSM because of the stigma that it brings to the person who suffers from, now they call it illness anxiety disorder, which I've always suffered from, didn't know what it was, but I was always called a hypochondriac. You know, that was some of the names that were aimed at me because of my going to the hospital every time that I had a panic attack. You know, that's the stigma. I remember doctors talking not to me, but about me in front of me in a very derogatory way. That's part of the stigma. You're not considered a person with brains and feelings. You're just considered this. We have to get rid of this person. She's nuts, you know. And I don't like to use those words, but that's what they would say, and they would say that behind your back or in front of your face. Okay, so like I said, I didn't have many tools, including books that would help me, but there were a few, and I'm going to go through some of them now. But I wanted to say that now, unlike the 50s, the 60s, and even the 70s, there are tons of tools that we can use to get through this thing called mental illness. So there's hope. Even medicine has changed. I was very afraid of taking any medication because my mother got hooked on a drug called Miltown, which really didn't help her. In fact, she was, when she was in and out of the hospitals, they basically gave her shock treatments. And that, she said, that was the only thing that could help. And even now, some people get shock treatments, but not in the barbaric way that my mother was given a shock treatment without any kind of medication or anything. So she got hooked on these pills, and they didn't do her any good, and she was in and out of hospitals. So I was afraid of taking any medication until I got therapy, like maybe 20 years ago, and a therapist said, this is not going to get you high or get you hooked. It's just something, you're on the bottom, you're in the basement right now, and this will get you to the first floor. It's not going to get you to the second or third floor, but you'll be on an even keel, and you won't be so anxious. So that's when I started taking medication, when medication actually got to the point where it could be helpful. And I know that there are some people who feel that it's not helpful, and that's another topic. So what books did I read to help me then? As the May goes on, when we start May, I have a lot of new books that I didn't even know existed until a few years ago and up to recently. And I'm so excited to be able to share that with you, as well as other topics that I'm going to do on mental illness and stigma. So, but for right now, I just want to talk about a few books that were helpful. And one is a book that I didn't expect to be helpful. It's Man's Search for Meaning. It's an introduction to logotherapy. This is by Viktor Frankl, who was a concentration camp survivor. And the first part of the book deals with his experience in a concentration camp. But the second part of the book, and that's the part that was helpful to me. Well, it was all very helpful to me. And he's talking about logotherapy. So what is logotherapy? It's a form of therapy that he developed after surviving the concentration camp that's focused on the future and our ability to endure hardship and suffering through a search for purpose. And I really recommend this book because it's a wonderful book in general. But a quote from the book that was meaningful to me is, well, they always say man, but of course we should say man and woman can preserve a vestige of spiritual freedom, of independence of mind, even in terrible conditions of psychic and physical stress. And I think that really touched me, because when you're going through an anxiety disorder, you have that psychic and physical stress, and that gave me hope. And this quote also gave me hope. Every human being has the freedom to change at any instant. And you know, of course, when you're going through anxiety, you don't feel that you have that choice. But just having someone say it gives you that feeling that you can do it, and that's great. My other book that I want to talk about didn't really help me that much, but I know it helped a lot of people, and that's Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all small stuff by Richard Carlson, Ph.D. Simple ways to keep the little things from taking over your life. And one, I just turned to this page, and it says, life is a test. It is only a test. And then there's once a week, write a heartfelt letter. Ask yourself this question. This is really did help. Ask yourself this question. Will this matter a year from now? Usually we worry about things that really are not important. And he's saying nothing is important. I don't know if that's true. But yeah, will it matter a year from now if someone yelled at you? If you're in school? Because I did have a lot of teacher anxiety and bully anxiety. I wish that I had been able to use that tool then. But Kim is going to talk about a lot of books that I would have really gained so much from as a child with anxiety. But anyway, this is a book that you can read, as is Louise L. Hay's Meditation to Heal One's Life. She's a controversial author because I think she didn't believe in medicine. And when the AIDS epidemic came around, though she was trying to help the men then that had HIV, she didn't believe that it was a physical illness. So yeah, that was not good. So, but she did write a book about meditations. And here's one. My goal is to love myself more today than yesterday. I put love into my daily schedule. Whether I go to the market or the office or travel around the world or just stay at home. One of our purposes in life is to help heal the world. So we start with healing ourselves. The center of our world is wherever we are. I'm not going to go and read the rest, but you get the idea. It really has a lot of good thoughts in here that might help if you're anxious. The next book that really helped me is actually a workbook, the Self-Esteem Guided Journal, a 10-week program. So self-esteem is something that was touted a lot during the 70s and 80s. And now self-esteem is more thought of as self-compassion. But this book helped me a lot. Basically, if you like writing, and I do, you can get a lot about it. So let me just, here's one that I did write in. It says, non-judgment with yourself. Your task today is to observe yourself without evaluation. Notice how often you slip into judgments about your behavior, your feelings, experiences from the past. And going backwards, non-judgment with your partner, past or present. And I said, okay, now this is a hard one I wrote, so I'm not going to go into that. Non-judgment with children. I did work with this, and I got some things out of it. So give it a try. It's by Matthew McKay, Ph.D., and he has an author of the best-selling Self-Esteem. And it says Catherine Sutker. So maybe that's who co-wrote that book with him. So it's a journal to help you see a better you, and that's pretty good. A book that surprised me was Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose. He wrote the book Living in the Now, and I thought this was, well, woo-woo kind of book that wasn't for me. But when I got this from a book library sale, and when I read it, I didn't agree with 100% of what he was saying, but I did get some good things out of this book. I'm going to read you what it says. In the book, Tolle asserts that everyone can find the freedom and joy in life if they live in the present moment. And we know that that's a big thing nowadays, is living in the moment. Easier said than done. The book describes human dysfunction, selfishness, anxiety, and inhumanity we inflict on each other, as well as mankind's failed attempts to find life meaning and purpose through material possessions and unhealthy relationships. But it also has a lot of, a lot of it was over my head, but I think he's a good person. And he really has a lot of good ideas about meditation, and that helped me calm down my anxiety. So if this is your thing, give it a chance. Now I'm going to just talk briefly about my binge eating disorder, which was a way that I dealt with my anxiety as a child. Even though I was not overweight, I still remember eating, for example, potato chips, couldn't stop, and Coca-Cola. And even though I wasn't overweight at that time, later on in my life, I got very overweight. And that's not, I just want to say, being overweight doesn't mean you have an eating disorder. But this is a mental illness. It used to be part of an anxiety disorder, but now it's completely in its own in the book of the DSM. And this book I found very helpful. It's Eating with Fierce Kindness by Sasha T. Loring, M.ED, LCSW. I don't know exactly what all those words mean, but I think she got a lot of education on the subject. It says, a mindful and compassionate guide to losing weight. Now, losing weight, this book was written quite a while ago, and 2010. So I don't think that a book about eating disorders should have that goal in mind of losing weight. But this book was really good. And in fact, in chapter 4, it says, viewing weight loss as an outcome, not a goal. And the inner critic to compassion, what fierce kindness means, befriending yourself. So all of, this is good stuff. Most of it is. So if you suffer from binge eating disorder or any kind of eating disorder, maybe some of this can help you. Another book that did help me, because of the title, was French Toast for Breakfast. Now, French toast was one of the foods that I craved, and a lot of what Cohen is saying, why she used this as her title, was because of all the people that she helped, and she was a therapist professional psychotherapist and director of the New York Center for Eating Disorders. And why she named it this is because that most of her patients said that if they can eat anything they want, it would be French toast. Of course, this is New York where we had really good French toast, but it really made me buy the book. And I really got a lot out of it, emotional eating. And my emotional eating was very complicated, and I'm not going to go into it right now. But it's not just one thing. People suffer from eating disorders because of a variety of things, not only anxiety. Anyway, so these are the books that somewhat helped me. If you can get some benefit from it, I would be really happy. But I'm going to be talking about books that are more up to date in May and maybe more specific. So I hope you got something out of this video, and I'm very grateful to Kim for doing this readathon with me. Like she says, you only have to read one book, fiction or nonfiction, on mental illness or mental health to say you participated in this readathon. So until we meet again, my friends, I wish you health and peace, and of course, aloha.